Welcome to Square Notes, the Sacred Music Podcast. Your chance to learn about the teachings of the Catholic Church on sacred music, both in theory and practice. Through interviews, discussions, and music, your hearts and minds will be lifted up and better understand what it means to sing the praise of His glory. And now, your host, Dr. Jennifer Donaldson-Nowicka.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Square Notes, the Sacred Music Podcast. Our guest today is a name perhaps well known to many listeners for his work in creating hymn tune versions of the Introits. But he has insights to share with us on many topics, including the foundation of Cathedral choir schools, which he's now successfully done twice in his career, and organ improvisation, having studied with Jean Manglais in Paris and won one of the most prestigious prizes for organ improvisation in the world, the Tournemire Prize in Improvisation at the St. Albans International Organ Competition in England. It's on this latter subject that he'll be joining the faculty of the Catholic Institute of Sacred Music this summer. He'll teach a seminar in organ improvisation limited to 3 students the week of July 17th through the 21st here at St. Patrick's Seminary in Menlo Park. An application to his course and the other 11 courses we're offering this summer is now available on the Institute's website, catholicinstituteofsacredmusic.org. And this summer, 2023, we're offering free tuition as well as affordable room and board for those students studying in person. In the meantime, I interviewed him about all of these topics, and you'll find some helpful insights here, especially about improving your organ improvisation skills and working to build a choir school. Here's the interview. Chris, it's just a real pleasure to have you on the show with me today. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me.
Our topic today is about plotting a path forward for improving one's improvisations at the organ. But there are so many topics that I know our listeners would like to hear about from you that I'd like to be sure to cover all those things and not leave anything out. Of course, we have to eventually make our way to the topic of organ improvisation. But first, I'd like to start off with a project that many will think about when they hear your name, Introit hymns for the church year. Can you tell us a little bit about the part of your history and background that led to the genesis of that project?
Yes. My first interest in the proper texts came about during my graduate study at the Yale Institute of Sacred Music, where Father Aidan Kavanagh was my advisor. Much later, when I received the opportunity for a sabbatical in 2002, I thought of doing continuing study on the subject. And then Father John Telesphore, who at the time was at the Office of Worship of the Archdiocese, suggested that I do something on the introits to come up with some settings that people could actually sing. So I went to Oxford University with the family in tow as a visiting scholar of St. Benet's Hall. That's the Benedictine College of Oxford University. And I tried to do just that.
Can you tell us and describe the project for those of our listeners who might not be as familiar with it? How is each hymn text structured, and how did you develop those texts?
Okay. Well, first of all, you have to understand that the introits are part of the proper texts. So those are the texts of the church that change for every celebration. So it's quite a daunting project to look at them and try to see, well, how do I make them possible for congregational use? So I decided early on that the hymn format would probably work best as far as congregational participation goes, because people are already singing hymns. There are any number of familiar hymns, so I just had to find the right meter for the particular texts that would make it possible to sing those. I decided, well, first of all, to set the antiphons in metrical form. And then the question was what to do with the introit psalm verses. I thought, well, maybe I'll just have a little chant here and then blah, 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 and, make it a little bit more responsorial singing. But then my sabbatical studies into the nature of the introit revealed that the antiphonal form of the introit, where the antiphon is sung at the beginning and the very end, and in the middle we would have the psalm verse and the Gloria Patri, is much more like the psalmody found in the office. So once I found that out, then it made real sense to do the verses to the same format as the antiphon, so to continue singing the hymn all the way through.
So is each antiphon usually just the first verse of each hymn, or are the longer ones two verses? How did you manage that?
Well, I was usually able to fit the antiphon into one verse. So that verse would be sung at the very beginning and at the very end, and in between would be the psalm verses. On occasion, I would have a very long meter, like 8868, 8868, or something like that. And I would fit the antiphon in the first four lines and then go right into the first verse of the psalm and so on. And then at the very end, have the first four lines be the doxology, and then the last four lines be the antiphon again.
Yeah, so just two verses overall. I see.
Yeah.
Did you ever try doing anything where you would use, of course, in the gradual, there's only one psalm verse given, but there's the option for longer processions of having more than one psalm verse. Do you have any sorts of thoughts about including extra verses in that way, or have you tried doing that?
Well, yes, in the introit hymns, there are multiple verses. And Ordo Romanus 1, the first papal ordo, says that the psalm is sung after the antiphon, so which would lead us to believe that in the pure form, the whole psalm would have been sung, followed by the Gloria Patri, and then a repeat of the antiphon. In a practical sense, however, by the time Ordo Romanus 1 comes along, the Pope nods to the Schola when he's ready to go into the Gloria Patri, and they have to stop the psalm and go into the Gloria Patri. So
it's every bishop's dream come true.
Yes.
Perfectly compliant choir that ends right when he wants.
Yeah.
Just in looking at the overall pastoral use of this, you just mentioned Ordo Romanus 1, the Introit really has belonged to this specialized group since the beginning of that Schola sort of approach to chant, and not been something that was sung by the congregation. But were you receiving requests for the congregation to have some way of singing the Introit, perhaps in the spirit outlined in Musicum Sacram, where it talks about, or Sacra Sanctum Concilium, where it talks about the congregation participating in the antiphons and hymns and canticles, etc.? What was a sort of pastoral genesis and useful aspect of this?
Yeah. In early Rome, we could imagine that the Schola would have sung all the proper texts and the congregation would have sung the ordinary texts. And it made sense for that particular tradition. I think even before Vatican II, people, in some countries were already singing at the beginning of the Mass. I grew up always having an opening hymn that the congregation would sing. So it made sense to kind of combine the two, the document saying that we should promote the proper texts with what we already have, is that the people are singing at the beginning, and to give people the opportunity to sing those proper texts, which before that, there weren't too many materials available to do that.
Right. Yeah. Can you even think of any projects before yours that were kind of intent on the congregational singing of the propers? It's hard to think of too many things. Of course, there were, translations of the propers right around 1965, 1968.
Yeah.
But they weren't really intended to be congregational.
Well, there were some that were borderline congregational. I think by Flowing Waters by Paul.
Oh, yes, of
but
course.
That's based on the Graduale Simplex.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a collection of texts based on the Roman Missal texts, proper texts, not from the Graduale Romanum. Of course, that's a different story. Yes. But they, they're kind of singable, but they're in a different style.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit to another huge contribution that you've made to the life of the church, and that is in the development of cathedral choral programs for children and adults. Of course, I just moved from New York, and I know very well your legacy living on very strongly at St. Agnes Cathedral in Rockville Center. And now you're working to establish a choir school at St. Bridget's here in San Francisco at the Archbishop's request. I think there are a lot of listeners who are really interested in this choir school idea, and you have done it very well and successfully. So What would you say to someone who's looking to do that sort of thing? I mean, for example, how do you even begin to start a project like that in terms of leadership structures, and what sorts of things have to be in place to start things? And then once you actually get things rolling, and let's say you have like a parish school that you're trying to transform, like what are some of the sorts of schedule and structural changes that are necessary right at the beginning of a project like that?
Okay, well, first of all, I should really write a book about this so that it's out there. But there are those of us who are lucky enough to start the choir school from scratch, like the Magdalene Choir School of Salt Lake City, which was always my dream to have a choir school like that, where you have all the children in the school are part of the choral program, and you can have choir rehearsal right in the middle of the school day. However, I had the challenge of establishing a choir school at an already existing Catholic elementary school. And so the main ingredient for starting such a project are a pastor and a school principal who share the vision. If one of them is not there, it's not going to happen. So while the school is being established, it's important to have support from all sides. And then you need funding. So, which in my case came from parents of alumni of an already existing children's choir at the Cathedral, and also from the Gellert Foundation that gave some seed money for a couple of years for us to help get started. And next, you not only need to build up the choir, but also the school music curriculum. And so the school teacher has to be on board with the curriculum that you want. In my case, the principal made me in charge of the school curriculum. So I had to go out and find the right music teachers, and went from there. You also need to establish good relations with the faculty, that you get their support, especially when you start taking minutes, that the Department of Catholic Schools says you have to have so many minutes for such and such a subject and so on. Well, when you start expanding the music curriculum, you have to take minutes from somewhere. And so we found some studies that say that serious study in music enhances analytical thinking of the children, and it actually helps in other subjects, for instance, math, languages, and things like that. So we were able to take some minutes from other subjects, move them to music, to establish the music program that we have now. The biggest hurdle was daily choir practice. And the only way that I saw that happening with, sports and all sorts of other activities after school was to move to an hour before school. And for that to happen, we had to move the school day further into the day. And we were finally able to do that this year. So that was the last hurdle, and we're here.
How many minutes a day do you rehearse in the morning? Is it a full hour or?
No, it's 45 minutes. So we were able to move the school day 15 minutes. It's not ideal, but with two people working in the with the choir each day, I think it makes it flexible, because we can separate them according to sections. Let's say I'll work with the sopranos, Marnie will work with the altos, or she will take the third and fourth graders. I'll work with the upper choir. Or sometimes we have the boys singing by themselves for a mass, or the girls singing. And so we can split them up however we want. 45 minutes, I think, is a good time. It's what I had in Rockville Center. Mm-hmm. 3 days a week we did it. It gives enough time for 5 minutes of warm-up, 5 minutes of sight singing exercises, and then 35 minutes of repertoire.
Right. And how often do they sing for the liturgy, and which liturgies are they singing for?
Okay, they sing usually at the end of the month at the 11 o'clock Mass. Then they sing alternating boys and girls once a month in the middle of the month for the 9 o'clock Gregorian chant Mass. And then the older children of grades 5 through 8, they also sing for special masses, usually with the Archbishop, like the Walk for Life Mass. Then they did the Archdiocesan wedding anniversaries. Then March 3rd, they will sing for a convocation of high school teachers. So all of them at the request of the Archbishop.
Yeah, that's its own sort of animal. But how does it interact with the regular music curriculum? And do they have music class every day?
They don't have music class every day. Some grades have it. I think some of the low grades have it 4 days a week. As they go up, the academic demands become a little bit heavier. So, like in the 7th, and 8th grade, I think they may have 3 days a week, 45 minutes or something like that, which is still a lot compared to some other schools. In grades 5 and 6, one of those days is taken up by strings. So they learn how to play the violin, which helps strengthen their hearing. And our violin instructor is very good about not putting the marks on the fingerboard, so that they really have to tune according to their hearing rather than to what they see.
Yeah.
And then in grade 7 and 8, one day a week is devoted to handbells.
I see. And the kids coming every morning, is that just a select group from the whole school? And what you just described is the curriculum for the whole school, obviously, but is the whole school coming for that 45 minutes in the morning, or it's a select group?
No, only the choir. So the way this happens is that anybody who wants to join the choir can audition for me, and then they either make it or they don't. Most do, because we have such a good musical culture that all the kids in the school know how to sing. After Christmas, I audition all of the second graders, and they then become probationers. And during the probationary period, they see what choir is like, I see what they're like, and then by the time the spring concert comes around and they are officially inducted into the choir, they will have an idea of whether this is a good fit.
Yeah, great. You mentioned sight reading, that you had about 5 minutes a day for sight reading. Are you using solfege? Are you using a system, or is it something you've invented, something you've imported? What do you do?
Okay. Well, the school itself teaches music, also musical literacy, sight reading. It's based on the Kodai method with some inspiration by the Ward method. And what I did is I developed a system where I teach solfege using square notation. And it's based on the Kodai sequence. So starting with mi, so, mi, to, so, mi, and so on. Mm-hmm. And then moving up to other configurations. With square notation, the benefit is, well, first of all, the application to the Catholic liturgy, but also children are always able to tell where do is because of the clef. I had the older kids chant solfege on an introit this morning, and they're able to do that, well, not perfectly, but with some help, they can get all the way through an introit.
I'm going to shift gears again, because I have so many things to ask you about, because you're just such a multifaceted musician with so much that you've given in your service to the church. So now the main subject, organ improvisation. Can you tell me a little bit about your first steps in organ improvisation? Did you start improvising right away when you started playing the organ, and or when did you? And when you started, what sorts of materials interested you most?
Okay, well, first of all, my beginnings in the organ, it was kind of fortuitous how it happened. One of my friends had a piano, and the parents of this friend noticed that I would always run to the piano and pluck out these melodies, not only the melodies, but I would play harmony. And so I would say that those were probably my first improvisational attempts. And then...
and were they just songs that you had stuck in your head, or were they things that you were making up?
No, those were things that were stuck in my head. So existing melodies. Mm-hmm. But the harmonies, they were all my own. But in any case, my first mass that I played, I had to improvise quite a bit. And I was 12 years old. It was Christmas Day, and I forgot my music at home.
It's everyone's worst nightmare.
It was absolutely terrible. The first few measures I had memorized, and after that you couldn't tell what I was doing, but I kept on going. So, and then, of course, playing in this church or another. I also played in the Lutheran church for a while, where hymn singing was very important. So I became quite adept at reharmonization, playing interludes, doing modulations and things like that, all hymn-based, but also some free improvisation, like if communion went a little bit too long, then I'd have to fill it in. And then after graduating from San Jose State University, I had the great privilege of studying improvisation with Jean Langlais in Paris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, this is perhaps because you've done so many other things in your career, maybe people don't know this about you, but you, after that study with Langlais, you went on to win one of the most prestigious prizes that, exists. And that's the Tournemire Prize in Improvisation at the St. Albans International Organ Competition. So obviously, I mean, this point in your life with Langlais was a transformative moment and something really reaching you at a very high level. So can you describe for us a little bit about your studies with Langlais?
First of all, Langlais was very set in his ways. There was one way to teach and one thing for the student to do, which was exactly what he wanted. And it was exactly the right thing for me because I wanted to learn his way. But he approached improvisation from the point of view of a study of form. So every improvisation had to be pre-planned, much like a mathematical formula, where you just plug in the variables and you get the desired result. And in organ improvisation, you get the theme, you apply it to the form, and then you get the result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What were his prized forms? Was it rondo form, a song form, those sorts of things?
Okay, well, the first one, he actually had me do a trio first. So he did couple a little bit of counterpoint with the form. But then the first form itself was a binary form, where there was a first section, so many measures. It all had to be pre-planned according to the measures. And then you would go into the dominant key, you would do so many measures of something else, and then you would go back. And from there, we gradually went into sonata allegro form. And at the end, a toccata, of course, was also sonata allegro form, depending on how many themes you had, sometimes monothematic sonata form, and then ending with fugue.
Yeah.
Fugue, of course, is not a form. Yes. It's a procedure. So
yeah. So this summer, you'll be teaching a seminar in organ improvisation, and it's limited to 3 students here at St. Patrick's Seminary for the Catholic Institute of Sacred Music. What are some of the key elements you'll cover in that seminar? Are you going to take the Langlais approach, or is there a Tietze approach?
Well, I think I will take the Langlais approach. So So I will start with some simple forms like a rounded binary and go on from there into more complicated forms. But there will also be some work on harmonic language and counterpoint, the establishment of an improviser's bag of tricks, some material an improviser can always have at the ready when he or she runs out of ideas.
Yes, that is really invaluable. What resources besides, taking this seminar with you or this development of a bag of tricks, might you turn people to, like if they are trying to look for ways to add to this bag of tricks or just get new ideas on how to grow? What are some ideas and resources that you particularly find inspiring that you might send people to?
Okay. Well, there are a number of books on organ improvisation, and each one of them has a different angle. So it's really important to look at a whole bunch of these things to get a broad overview of what improvisation can be. I found the Dupré book very helpful to establish a firm grasp of traditional harmony. So he goes through all the scales, and you have to harmonize each one of them, going up and down in each key, every key, major, minor, harmonic minor, melodic minor, what have you. Not only in the soprano, but also the alto and tenor and bass. So I spent the whole summer doing nothing but scales from the Dupré book. Then Wayne Leupold has a whole series of books on improvisation, and each one of them with a different emphasis, like German Baroque improvisation or French Romantic. But there is no substitute to actually practicing improvisations and doing them. And if you have a group of people who can improvise for each other, you can get a lot of inspiration and encouragement from each other.
Yeah, that's so true. I always enjoy listening to other people. It's so inspiring.
Yeah.
And of course, undergirding all of that are the sort of spiritual elements that an organist is bringing to the table, and a strong understanding of the liturgy. What do you think those important interior elements are for the organist when they're thinking about that role as a sort of commentator or improviser at the liturgy?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you have to be part of the liturgy. You can't be just a performer. Your music ties directly into the liturgy and supports the liturgy. Normally, in liturgical improvisation, your playing is tied into a particular liturgical action, and you have to take care that the music supports both the action spiritually, but also the length of the action. You could improvise the most sublime offertory in sonata allegro form, something that lifts people's souls to ethereal joys, but it will miss its mark if you make the celebrant stand there for 2 minutes while you try to find your way through a recapitulation. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. I'm really delighted you'll be with us this summer, and it's always a pleasure to chat with you. And I'm sure that our listeners have found this very inspiring.
Well, thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to Square Notes, the Sacred Music Podcast with Dr. Jennifer Donaldson-Nowicka. For more information about this episode, sacred music resources, or upcoming events, visit our website at sacredmusicpodcast.com. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. If you enjoy our podcast, please write us a review on iTunes. This improves our iTunes ranking and helps others find out about the podcast. The music you heard at the beginning of this episode is Hec Dies by William Byrd, sung by the London Oratory's Schola Cantorum Boys Choir, directed by Charles Cole from the CD Sacred Treasures of England. The music at the conclusion of this podcast is from the Prelude and Fugue in G Major, BWV 550 by Johann Sebastian Bach, performed by Jennifer Donaldson-Nowicka. We look forward to having you join us next time, and until then, may we sing the praise of His glory.